Welcome everyone to week number 4 in Science 200. We are almost to the halfway point in our course. Let's see what we've got going on this week. So, first of all, last week, week 3, you found some sources. You gathered some sources. You looked at the Shapiro Library. Maybe you looked at PubMed. Maybe you looked at Google Scholar. There was another one, Web of Science, I think, that I saw someone put in the discussion board. So you found some sources, hopefully some good ones that are scientific, not just a bunch of websites and blogs, I hope. And you've gathered information from them. So that's good because you're going to need that for your project that you're working on. Read through chapter 4, work through the exercises. There's more information in chapter 4 about the Flint, Michigan water crisis and the lead that was leached into the water source and then made its way into the human beings who consume that water. So there is more information about that particular crisis. And the reason that we're using that particular issue this week is because we're talking about levels of scientific communication. Science is communicated in lots and lots of different ways. And if you're talking about written forms of communication, it goes from journals all the way to news articles. A journal is a way that research scientists communicate their findings to other research scientists who are interested in their topic. So, for example, when I wrote up my dissertation research, I published in the journal Electrophoresis. You have never heard of the journal. You know, a journal is a scientific magazine. You've never heard of the journal Electrophoresis. You don't know what it is my guess. Electrophoresis is a technique where you separate apart DNA molecules and also protein molecules. And it was the basis for DNA fingerprinting. That has since changed, even though it's sort of done the same, but in a different way now. So anyway, electrophoresis is where I published, and the general public is not going to read that journal. So I was writing it for other scientists who are interested in electrophoresis to read and to critique, etc. So you've got that level of communication, and then below that you have review articles, and I have mentioned this in a couple of the discussion board postings, to type in the word review when you type in your other keywords, because a scientist has already looked at your particular topic, researched it. This is probably their work also. They've gathered up resources, they've gathered up references, and they make sense of it all. They explain it in a review article, how this works, what the research says. And this is important for a couple of reasons. For one, it's actual scientific work. For another reason here, is that it's written in a way that you and I, even if we don't really understand the topic, can understand it. And another reason that it's important is because you have all these references at the end of the review article that you can use, that you can go and look up. So review articles are awesome. Remember, they're written by scientists. And then you go all the way down the line until you have news articles. News articles are totally different from anything that we write in science. Because what do they say? Fair and balanced, right? You got to say this point of view and the opposite point of view. Well, that's not really how it works in science, right? Everybody comes to a consensus about how things work. Now, there will always be a few outliers that say, no, we don't think that's the way that it works. That's perfectly fine for their point of view, but that's not what is generally accepted. And so we go with what's generally accepted because you have to do that in life. You have to go with where the most evidence is. So a news article is totally different from a scientific article, and you will see that in the textbook this week. Another thing I want to mention to you is that you need to check your feedback for the last couple, for weeks 1 and 2, where you did work on your project and fix those things that you need to fix by reading through my feedback. Okay, that's going to be important so that you get those right for the work that you have to turn in for this week. You're going to turn in your rough draft. So with your project, you are writing a paper. In week 6, you turn in the final copy of your paper. In weeks 7 and 8, you're putting together a presentation based on what? On that paper that you wrote. Okay, so this week you're going to turn in a rough draft. Next week, in week 5, you're going to add a little bit to it. I'll explain that when we get there. And in week 6, you turn in your finalized paper. So know that that is coming. You're going to discuss who your audience is, and I'll get into that in just a minute, and what are the natural principles. You're going to add that to what you've already discussed so far in weeks 1 and 2. No discussion board postings this week. They won't come back until week 6. All right, this is the guidelines for your paper for week 4. I took this directly off of the learning module, and I've highlighted some things, and I want to point them out. Notice that there are 2 sections. There's the introduction and the body. These should always be labeled in any scientific work because I need to know what I'm looking at. This is not an English essay. You know how in English you just write and write and write and write and write and write and write. And of course there are parts to an English paper. There's an introduction, there's a conclusion section, and the body of it. Yeah, you got all that, but nothing's ever labeled. In science, you label everything so that I know exactly what you're talking about. So under introduction, describe the issue that you are going to investigate. Oh, wait a minute. That sounds like what you did in week 1. Exactly. That's what you were supposed to have done in week 1. Now, there were a lot of issues with what I read from week 1 because that word that I have underlined right there, describe that. A lot of people didn't do that. If you just say GMOs are a very important issue today. What are GMOs? If you're presenting this to an audience, what are they? How are they made? Why are they made? Why do you genetically modify anything? So that's really important to describe. So describe means to fully explain something, right? Anytime you see that word, and I've marked it a couple of times, anytime you see it, it means to fully describe. You're also going to explain why this issue is significant. Remember, you did that in week 1 too. You might want to add to that now. Why do you have to say this? Because when you're making a presentation to an audience, say your topic is ocean acidification. You may stand up there and say, ocean acidification is an important problem today. And everybody in the audience is looking up at the ceiling going, okay, what does that have to do with me? So you have to tell them what that has to do with you. You're going to say, it's affecting marine life, and there have already been studies done that shellfish and fish that are fished for food are, the populations are dying down, and so this is a terribly important issue having to do with food supply. That'll get their attention now, won't it? So that's why you have to describe to your audience why this issue is significant. All right, then you're going to describe your 3 science sources, resources, those articles that you've looked up. Notice that word again, describe. So you're going to explain what those sources told you, what you learned from them, right? That's the whole point of this. Learn something from the sources to help you with what you are writing because it gives you data, it gives you information about your particular topic. So you're going to explain that in this section. And then you were supposed to develop a specific question. You may want to modify this a little bit. It depends on what you've already found. Most people did a good job with developing a specific question to ask about your topic. All right, then you have the body of the paper. In this, you're going to identify an audience. So what in the world does that mean? Who are you giving this presentation to? And I will explain to you that I've been doing scientific talks for a very long time. And I have talked to preschoolers and had them do science experiments all the way to a nursing home one time. And let me tell you, that was probably my most difficult audience. You know why? Because most of them couldn't even hear me. So yeah, that was kind of pitiful. But anyway, my peers, my research group at Clemson when I was there in graduate school, medical doctors who know a lot, but who certainly didn't know anything about my particular research, high school students, college students like you, colleagues of mine in the science department, and the list goes on and on. You have to tailor your particular presentation to your audience. How much do they know about your topic? Are you going to have to do a lot of defining of terms? Are you going to have to scale back on the information because you don't want to overwhelm them? What is their viewpoint going to be? If you're giving a GMO presentation to a group of people who are terrified, they live in a subdivision and they're terrified of the neighboring farmer who's using GMO crops, then you have to look at it from their point of view and figure out how to describe this to them. And that comes along with the next section. How are you going to tailor your message to your audience and give specific examples? Are you going to have to define? Are you going to have to show graphs? Are you going to have to, I don't know, show lots of pictures? Because sometimes that's very effective. So give examples about how you're going to make this presentation accessible and understandable to your audience. And then you're going to identify natural science principles that have to do with your question. So they give the example here of climate change. And one principle that goes along with that is that the sun is the major energy source for all energy on the planet, which is a great natural science principle. Another one that I could give to you is, say, for example, ocean acidification. The main problem with ocean acidification is the fact that excessive carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is diffusing into the water of the ocean, and that is changing the pH of the ocean. That's a chemical reaction, and this is something that you need to explain in this section. So that's an example of a natural science principle. If you're not sure about this, please just email me. I can help you with it. I promise. Whatever your topic is, I don't care what it is. I can help you figure out some principle in science that has to do with your topic. And you're going to explain how your principle or principles applies to your particular issue and your question. Okay, that's pulling in the science back into your topic, even though you're looking at your audience and how to explain things to them and that sort of thing. Okay, so I wanted to go through the guidelines to help you a little bit with that, because you know that that's what I'm going to be looking for when I grade your rough draft in week 4. And then finally, my tip of the week is to ask for my help. And I just explained this to you on my last slide. But anyway, ask for help if you get stumped, if you don't know what you're doing. If you have any questions, please just ask me. I'm here. I'm here for you. m.sigmon@snhu.edu. I'll be glad to answer your questions. I'll be glad to guide you through anything that you're having difficulty with. Because some of this, I realize that you don't know this science. I'm a scientist. I'm here to help you work through this. Okay? So please do ask for help. Anytime. Glad to help you. With that being said, I hope that you have a wonderful week number 4.